Hey, this is Patrick Perry with my producer Dirty with the Cryptid Quest podcast. And tonight we're going to have Old Bear's Den on, and he's going to have some crazy tales about Dogman and Bigfoot. Stay tuned, you're going to enjoy. First off, wanted to introduce my guest, Old Bear, and you have your own podcast, or do you just what's your gig?
I'm on YouTube. I've got well over 200 videos. I've done multiple lives on YouTube, and I've been doing this for 40 years, looking for Bigfoot.
Yeah, I knew you've been doing it a long time, a lot longer than I have. I knew that. So, do you consider yourself a researcher, an investigator, or you just?
No, actually, I consider myself both. Um, at one point, I did 5 years of research on a clan here in West Virginia that I'd found and gotten close to them. There was a limit on distance that I could be, how close I could be to them. And I've done investigations on Bigfoot that have been at people's houses, trying to figure out a way to get them to stop coming to their house, beating on their house, ripping the eaves off their house, and throwing rocks on the roof, throwing tree limbs on the roof, just being a general pain in the neck.
Yeah.
And so I've done that too. I've done both.
Okay. So what is your main advice when somebody does not want them around?
Your first thing you need to find out is what caused them to come to your house in the first place. Were you putting trash out at night? And they're coming there and digging in the trash and getting food. You have to find the main reason that they're coming there. Are they just coming there because they're enthralled about, what you're doing? You got kids. Kids tend to draw Bigfoot. And the place where your home is has a lot to do with it. The closer you are to a large area of woods or a remote area and kids outside, it draws them to the house. And they just want to see the kids play. And they'll try to get you to come out. They want to see the kids play because we're television to them. But that's the main thing that you have to find out is why. Why are they coming here? And sometimes it takes 5 minutes. Sometimes it might take 4 or 5 hours of digging into what they're doing to figure them out.
So I heard you mention kids. Why do you think they're so enthralled with children?
Well, in the observation of the 5 years that I did with that clan, the alpha male and alpha female are very into raising the young. They seem to have enjoyment out of, they're young. So kids making squealing noises and being so active, human kids, it reminds them of their children. All the adults seem to enjoy watching the little ones, whether they're the alpha or betas.
So you don't think it's so much like a malicious thing more than entertainment?
No, the malicious thing, it comes in every once in a while. It's not an every time thing. They don't look to grab the kids. there's been many times that, and many reports that, the Bigfoot are there because they see kids playing, or they come to a local park, that's outside the city limits. Um, and, and people see them, and they find footprints and Bigfoot markers, and they're there watching kids play on the merry-go-round or on the seesaws or going up and down the slicky slides and stuff like that. It's
So
it's not malicious most of the time.
I wouldn't think so. Okay, so that draws me to another question. Um, because I've heard many tales about Native Americans talking about Bigfoot stealing their children.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think their mindset has changed over the years because of situations, or what's your take on that?
Well, when it comes to the Native Americans, um, I've talked to some elders in the Cherokee tribes, because that's mainly what was here in my home state, and from their telling of me to me of their old tradition, the Native American, they traded with Bigfoot, and some Bigfoot seem to grab children. Children never come back. But when those type of Bigfoot come in, the Native American would hunt them down. And there's a well told thing of Hanobia out in Oklahoma that happened. Where there was a clan of Bigfoot that was killing the kids out of the Native American tribe out there. They were grabbing women. They were killing young braves. And that doesn't happen all the time. That was a situation where there was a type of Bigfoot there. I speculated one time that they were Gugway, which is a Native American term for face eater. And they eat humans. They don't eat their own kind. There's another kind that's cannibalistic. And they are opportunistic killers of humans. If they're not going to get harmed, they're not going to get some kind of an injury or something by grabbing a woman or a young man or a child, and they can get it back to their clan and tear the child apart and eat the child or the lady or the young man. They'll do it. There's just, they're just that way. They see us as food. Many times we've been told that we taste like pork. So, you got to take it with a grain of salt. But
So
there's a lot of reports.
So that kind of takes me to another question I had for you later down the line, but I might as well
Mm-hmm.
ask it now. Do you think sections could be, because I've noticed they say that the creatures in certain sections of the country act differently. Some are more aggressive, some are
Mm-hmm.
less aggressive, some are friendly, some are just very territorial. Do you think that has anything to do with what part of the country or their region? Because I know they don't know boundaries, but do you think that has anything to do with any of that?
Oh yeah, it does. Um, I've been in 7 different states, uh, looking for Bigfoot, helping people. And the further north you go, the less aggressive they seem to be, until you get around a large human population. The more human population there is, the more aggressive they get, no matter what size they are. The thing of it is, if you're in the north, say you're in Pennsylvania or you're in New York or Maine or Connecticut, somewhere like that in the Northeast, or you're in Washington State or Oregon or Idaho, typically they don't pay a lot of attention to humans. There's a lot more area they can go and hide. And yeah, the Northeast is very populated, but people don't seem to understand that there's a lot of woods in those states. There's a lot of area for those big creatures to go out and roam around. But the further south you go, so you get to North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, they tend to get less. They tend to be less accepting of human intrusion. They'll walk you out. They'll throw rocks at you. They'll push trees over more. They just don't want you there because it seems to be the hotter the temperature, the more of the year that it's hot. They have a less of a. There's more aggression in them, just like human beings. You drive in the Northeast. Some states in the Northeast you don't want to drive in. New York is one that comes to mind, and that's mainly around New York City and Jersey City. But now you get to Charlotte, North Carolina. I hate driving in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm a truck driver by trade. There's
So is my
always
dad.
traffic. People are always cutting you off down there, and it's dog eat dog on the road. But then you get down into Florida, and in Florida, the humans in Florida are not, they're not nice to each other. I've been in Florida multiple times for the company I work for, and they are cutting you off. If you drive 1 hour on I-75 in Florida, headed towards Tampa, if you're not cut off 30 times in an hour, you've had a real good day. And the Bigfoot in Florida, they're super aggressive. It's hot most of the year. 10, 11 months out of the year, it's warm down there. Compared to my home state of West Virginia. We have a winter up here. It cools off. Down there is no such thing as winter. I've never seen snow in Florida. And I feel sorry for the people in Florida. They need to cool off sometimes in the year.
Yeah.
But the creatures, the further south you go, it seems they have more aggression because of the heat and the temperatures. Just like humans.
Yeah. So, hey, do you subscribe to the thought that there are different types?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So how many types do you think? I think I've heard four or five.
Five.
Five. Okay.
Five. And it's all based. I based all of the types that I have upon their appearance. Type ones are what I consider the ape type. They look like chimpanzees, orangs, gorillas. They have more of a slope, a peak to their head, and they have a slope on their head. And they just look more like a gorilla or a chimp or an orang or the other monkeys that are out there. I don't know nothing. I don't know nothing about the types of monkeys that are in the world, but they tend to have more of an animalistic looking face. They have more features of the apes. And then you got type two. a lot of scientists hate me for this, and I really don't care. It doesn't bother me. They look like Cro-Magnon man. They have very thick brow ridge. They look somewhat human, but they still have that animalistic type face. They got very sharp features, um, and their temperament is they don't want nothing to do with humans. They'll walk away from you or run away from you. Uh, you can see them in the woods, the monkey types. You don't see them very often. Um, but the Cro-Magnon, they've been seen. They've got very thick brow ridges, and they have very sharp features, very high cheekbones. Their eyes are a little bit different than ours. And then you got type 3, which is a human type. They look like modern humans. I've seen a lot of those. I've seen Cro-Magnon. I've seen the monkey type. But in the Cro-Magnon and monkey type, I've only probably seen 8 out of both of those types in 40 years. And then you go to a type 4. Type 4s are the ones that I call the Gugway. They tend to have canines that stick outside of their mouth, either from the bottom or the top. They got a little bit of a monkey or gorilla type pooch to their face.
Or baboon,
and they look,
maybe.
Yeah. And they are, they're very aggressive. They think a lot. They're very smart. All Bigfoot are smart. I mean, they can work out problems just like we do. But the Gugway is a detriment to humans. They will hunt us. If you're out hiking somewhere and all you got in your hand is a hiking stick, and you're out in the backwoods somewhere and one sees you, you might be on the dinner menu.
Okay,
if you're alone, I tell everybody, don't go into the woods alone.
Yeah.
I did it for years. It almost got me killed a few times. And I would tell people not to do it. You go camping, you go somewhere and you want to take a tent with you and go to a remote lake somewhere, carry a handgun. Carry a sizable handgun, one that you can shoot proficiently. You're very good with it. You can use it when you're under stress. And if you don't, you're just opening yourself up to a chance of being on the menu of something. And if it's a Gugway, you really don't have a snowball's chance in HE double hockey sticks.
Okay, and you pronounce that Gugway?
Yeah.
Or Gugway? Gugway?
Yeah, Gugway.
Okay. I think I've heard of that before, but I'm not 100% sure. But
it's spelled. There's a couple of spellings for it, but the way I spell it is Gugwe.
Okay. And I do want to get to your encounters, but I'm going to try and save that for last. So you talk about the Gugway. Do you think that possibly people, because there's a lot of dogman stories out there, do you think possibly people confuse them with the dogman just because of their appearance and their aggressiveness?
Yes. Sometimes there are. Now, I've seen dogmen. I've actually seen the type that they consider the werewolf.
I want to hear about it, but later.
But when someone has a sighting and they say they saw a dogman, I always question them. And I've talked to people many times, and they start describing them. All it had a short snout. It had teeth sticking out. Okay. Well, what was the shape of the head? Well, it kind of looks human to a point, and then it kind of, everything adds up, and they actually saw a Bigfoot. You can't convince them of that, but now it throws you in a different category of dealing with this type of creature. And um, people do make mistakes. I mean, you're under a lot of stress. Think about it. You see something that's 9 foot tall. It's being aggressive. It is big enough to rip you limb from limb in a heartbeat. And most handguns that people carry would do nothing but upset it. And, you know, everybody says, well, I carry a 9 mil. That's your
Push it
last
off.
ditch effort when it grabs you up and you stick it underneath its chin and start emptying the chamber. You empty that clip in its head at that distance. That's when a 9 will work.
Yeah.
By that time, you're already in a world of hurt and it's crushing you. It's killing you just for pleasure. So yeah, you have to be very, as a Bigfooter and as a knower of Bigfoot, because I've seen a bunch. You have to be, when you do research on Bigfoot, you have to be very intricate and get all the details that they can give you to say that it's a Bigfoot or it's a dogman. Because if you don't, then you're dealing with two separate cryptids out there and they act completely differently.
Yeah. So, your feelings on Bigfoot or Sasquatch, do you think they're strictly flesh and blood?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
they bleed. They die
they
just
believe.
like we do.
So,
They don't walk
and
into portals. None of that stuff.
that's where I was getting ready to go, because I tried to keep my mind open. I've not seen one. Okay. So I don't want to call anybody a liar. I lean towards the flesh and blood because that's what I want to believe it is, because I've had one screaming at me behind my blind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
So
watched
that's
your video the other day.
so so and then on as far as Dogman goes, do you what do you think about that? Because a lot of people think they might be demonic. I mean, do you think they're flesh and blood also, or what's your thoughts?
Every cryptid that you see out that has been seen in this world is flesh and blood, except for two that I know of. They have a definite connection to the demonic side of spirituality. Now, I'm a Christian minister. I'm an ordained Christian minister. And cryptids that are out there are not put here by God. They were not created because they would challenge God's creation. They're a corruption of his creation. But if you look back in Egyptian times, when it comes to Dogman, the god Set had a dog's head. So they've been around a long time. Bigfoot has been around a long time. The Bible, the Holy Bible, actually speaks of the Nephilim. Goliath was a Nephilim. He was around after the flood, not before. People get it wrong. The Bible speaks of giants of old. That was before the flood. That was during the time of Noah and Methuselah. And after the flood, during the time of Abraham and David, all that is the Nephilim. The Nephilim back then were oversized human beings that were covered in long hair. They had hair all over their body, but it wasn't thick. I mean, it wasn't no thicker than what I have. I'm kind of a hairy guy. My wife calls me her heater every winter. But a lot of people get it wrong. When it comes to these creatures, these Bigfoot, dogmen, there's history on them, thousands of years old. The United States has been here for 200 plus years. It's been a country for 200 plus years, getting close to 250 or maybe a little more. And, we have a written history in this country. But before the people came from England, Germany, Russia, all across the world came to this country, there was an oral history through the Native American. They were here in their times. Before the white settler came in and all that, it's a lot of difference between then and now. Now we see everything on the internet, and people constantly talk about these creatures now. When I first started, there was no internet. Everything was through word of mouth. You'd see people and talk to people, and it's not like that now. Now you can sit in Washington State and talk to somebody in Tampa, Florida, and talk
Hey, I'm
about
in
two different
Missouri.
creatures.
You're in West Virginia.
And these creatures are just all these cryptids. There's history on them. They've been around for thousands of years. Been around almost as long as man. A lot of them have, and there's a lot on them. You just have to sift through. I don't tell nobody they lie to me because it's what they see and perceive. It's a perception. Somebody says that they saw a dog man or saw a Bigfoot, and they see a dog man and they're like, is it real? Or their mind tends to shut down because of the sheer size of these creatures and what they represent. How many people that live? Let's take one person out of New York City, put them in the woods in Washington State, never been out camping, never been outside the city limits, been to Central Park a few times, and they think that's a forest. It's not. It's just a park. It's man keeps that park up to a certain standard. Stick them in the woods in Washington State and see how long it takes them to freak out. Once you set them down, set them down somewhere 500 or 600 yards from a major road or a secondary road. Take them in the woods 500 yards, blindfolded, lead them in, set them down on a stump, and when you walk off, when you get 50, 60 yards away from them, tell them to take the blindfold off and start running away from them. Don't run in the direction of the road. Find out how long it takes them to freak out. They're going to lose it.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I like that.
And then throw on top of that, they're in an element they're not used to. They're dealing with the stresses of that, and they run into a dog man or a Bigfoot. They've always heard they're not real. They're just Hollywood. That was what I was told when I was young, and a year later I saw the first one. So, yeah, I live in a country, type setting. I always have. I lived in the city of Charleston, West Virginia. I was raised in Charleston, but I always hunted with my family. I was in the woods. I went fishing. went places where in the backwoods, trout fishing. Um, been deer hunting all over the state of West Virginia. I've bear hunted all over West Virginia. And, I've seen game animals all over the state. But seeing one of these is it's a shock to your system. You're told they're not real. And you find out that they are. That throws you for a loop.
I'm sure it does. So you opened up a subject earlier that I wasn't really planning on talking about tonight, but you talked about giants. Um, I'm sure you're aware of Lovelock Cave, the story
Yeah.
of what are your thoughts on that? Because that story completely intrigues me, and I I'm pretty sure that they actually did an excavation of that cave where they found sandals that were like
Mm-hmm.
18 inches long. That's kind of mind blowing. What's your take on that?
There were giants in this land
I know there were.
many thousands of years ago. There still may be a few somewhere in the
Right.
parts of this world. Um, it's the things that people see. I don't doubt what they saw. I doubt the interpretation of what they saw. When it comes to these giants, I've never seen one, but I'm not going to call you a liar.
Yeah.
For the simple fact is, there's reports of them. There are very credible reports of giants. The Holy Bible tells me there were giants in the land. Um, and I tend to take the word of my Creator a lot more seriously. So
Amen.
if somebody says that they saw a giant, I'm not going to go, "Oh, you're full of it. You're not going to get treated that way by me." There's no way. I
Yeah.
can't do that.
So
So
I appreciate your honesty on that. I mean, because I wouldn't call anybody a liar either, you know. But I do totally get your point on people's perception of what they're seeing. Maybe they're
mhm.
freaked out. Maybe they think they see something they don't see, or hear something they're not really hearing. Um, but sometimes that doesn't even fly because you know what you saw and you know what you heard. So I mean, and the reports of the cave uh, came from the Native Americans, and I tend to trust a lot what they say in their oral history because they didn't have to lie about things like that. It was just part of
Yeah,
their natural world.
yeah.
So, let's see, where do I want to go now? Oh, so do you have any like? Do you think that there is a certain population of Sasquatch around? Do you have any concept on what their population numbers might be, or is that just something that is beyond what you can think?
No, that's definitely not beyond what I've thought about these creatures over the years. Um, in North America alone, which is Canada, United States, and Mexico, I would estimate the population when I first started around 2 million animals. And the reason I would estimate it at that is because I talked to um, many people when I first started about these creatures that had saw them here in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, even in Kentucky, Virginia, and they would describe, and sometimes they wouldn't describe just one creature. There was multiples, so they're families. They're all together, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them together at one time. including, the big ones down a step, and then you get down to the little ones. So they're based upon reports when I first started, because there wasn't a national database on this, at least not the everyday American citizen could get a hold of.
Yeah.
And this is before the BFRO. The BFRO, if you look at it, it'll tell you they've got, I think the last time I looked, it's around 7,000, 8,000 reports, and they've only had 1,500, 2,000 confirmed reports. Well, what happened to those other 6,000? They don't accept them because they don't have enough to their standards.
Yeah, their
Standards
criteria.
are a joke in this field.
Yeah.
And that's just in the U.S. And I estimate the population at 2 million, because if you look at Canada, oh boy, there's 80, 70, 80% of Canada is forested. Rugged territory. These creatures love to stay hidden. They don't want to be around us. We're a detriment to their population.
Yeah.
We've been shooting at them since the conquistadors came across and got into the United States, and the Brits and the French and the Germans and all.
Leif Erikson has a story. You've heard that one, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But
so
nowadays you're talking about a population probably around, I'd say, between 5 and 6 million.
Wow.
In North America alone. That's not, that's not talking about Russia, China, everything over in Europe, Asia. They're all over the world. The only place I've never heard of a Bigfoot is in Hawaii.
Correct.
Or the Samoan Island. The mountain islands in the Pacific.
So do you think do you think most of their population is like in Canada, or do you think, because there seems to be a lot of reports around the United States in certain areas, do you think they just stick to strictly like wooded areas, streams?
No.
Do you think they migrate? What do you think?
When I first started, they seemed to be a migratory type of creature. Meaning they would move, depending upon the season, food source, water supply, cover they could hide in. That all had a bearing on when they moved, where they moved to. And now it seems that a lot more of these creatures stay in a certain home range, say a 10-mile or 20-mile area. And the reason is because their population has gotten bigger. They lay claim to a piece of ground, and they don't like other clans to go across them. They don't, it's their property, it's their ground, and they keep it that way. I don't think they're migratory today because of there's over 330 million people alone in the United States. So no, they don't have to, and they don't have to move.
Yeah.
Look at it this way. How many strip malls are there along the interstates?
Can't even tell you.
Pick an interstate. I-77.
Sure.
Runs from Cleveland, Ohio to Columbia, South Carolina. I've drove from one end to the other today.
How many
it's a
strip
long
malls did you
drive.
count? I'm sure it is.
But the thing of it is, you drive down along the interstate, and when you come from Cleveland, Ohio, once you get out of the city of Cleveland, there's truck stops, mom and pop gas stations, and a lot of places have food places in them, like Subway, Burger King, McDonald's. What do they do with that food at night?
Throw it in the dumpster.
Yeah. What better place for a Bigfoot to come and get 10 Big Macs?
So
Yeah.
you've probably heard about the casino that caught the
Mm-hmm.
digging in the dumpster. But so go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you
Yeah.
off.
No. I know the casino. I've been there. I stayed there one night
Oh, that's
and,
cool.
was told by the security, do not get out of your truck at night. Once it
Yeah,
gets dark, do not get out of your truck. Stay in your truck. If you need
that's
to go to the restroom, it's right there.
yeah. So
Um,
and
Go straight there, straight back to your truck.
yeah, don't go
Don't pay
wandering.
attention to the noises.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah, they can eat the food that we make. Yeah, our food nowadays is filled with preservatives of everything they can come up with. And
yeah, but it's an easy meal
so
for 'em.
right, it's super easy for them to go and lift a dumpster lid up and reach in and grab a bag of all that meat from Subway. Hey, I can feed my whole family tonight, no problem.
Yeah.
And they carry it off. Um, I've got Bigfoot that come across and live across from my home. They come and get into our garbage bin, and they've carried garbage bags, and I've had to go pick it up because they string it halfway up behind my neighbor's house. And that's not no fun, but the only thing that's missing out of the garbage, because you pretty much know what's in your garbage, especially when you fill it up after having family over on a Sunday, and you take the trash down Sunday night so they can pick it up Monday morning. And the garbage men, I leave usually when our garbage guys are coming through. They're like, "Hey, you got garbage strewn up. Something got in your trash last night," and they'll tell you.
Yeah.
And you got trash strewn all the way up across the road and up the bank behind my neighbor's house. You go up there and pick up what's left of the garbage bag, and the only thing missing was what was left over from the dinner on Sunday evening.
Yeah. So
Um, yeah, they're bad about that.
so do you think that because I don't know, in my mind, my eyes, I think uh encounters, reports have elevated, like really elevated. Do you think that has strictly to do with population increase, encroachment on their territory, or do you think it's something else? Do you have a
It
thought?
has strictly to do with their increase in their population, not human population. And it has a lot to do with the ease that somebody can go out, go camping, go hiking in a national forest, state forest, or a county park, or something of that nature. And they go out and they see one of these creatures and they go home and they're like, I saw Bigfoot. They hit Google and you've got everything on YouTube, all the other TikTok, all those other platforms. People wanting to hear about your sighting.
Yeah.
It's easier to tell about it today and still stay anonymous so it don't affect your job. Everybody at work doesn't call you crazy. I've been called that a few times, and those drivers no longer work with me.
Yeah. Me too.
Um, so it's easier for people to come and say, get on the internet, stay anonymous, and say we saw Bigfoot at a camping area, and name the camping area, and everybody knows about it now.
Yeah, that
So it's
actually
easier for people to report their sighting.
I was gonna say, yeah, there's I don't know if it's a rumor or true, but there's a conservation area really near to where I work. It's in really rural Missouri, like on the border of Kansas and Missouri, to where they said they shut it down because of dogman attacks. And
Well,
I
I
don't know.
wouldn't doubt it.
I need to research more into that, but yeah, I've heard that. So do you think the government has knowledge of all this? Do you think they're keeping it under wraps? And if so, why would they be? Or do you think that's not in the mix?
No, that's definitely in the mix. And the reason I know a lot about it, I've been told by government officials to keep my mouth shut
I'm
twice.
sure. I'm sure.
And both times I just look at them and go, "You don't know who you're talking to." Um, I the government has known about these things since this became a country. Um, it started even before then. England knows about Bigfoot. France knows about it. Germany knows. Russia, China, Japan. Every country in the world that has a government knows about these creatures. It's kept quiet for one reason and one reason only: money. If people today, okay, let's take the state of California, for example. Every time they find a new salamander or they find a butterfly or an owl, they
Or a
shut
little
down a
fish.
lot of areas. You can't go in and you can't cut the trees down. This spotted owl, there's one spotted owl that we saw. We don't know if it's the last one. We don't know if there's a population of 50,000 of them in that area. But you can't cut the trees down now. You can't go in and forest. It's public ground, and then they stop the people from that own property from going in and having their property forested. And the reason is that one owl, or that one butterfly, or that salamander in the creek. The reason the government keeps it under wraps and they know about these things is because the government has to keep it quiet, or trillions upon trillions of dollars will stop flowing in. Just because of forestry, mining, uh, wells, oil, natural gas, uh, salt, all that stuff will stop because that one nature group will take them to federal court and say you have to create a place for these creatures. They're endangered. Um, you know, you can't kill them all. You got to leave them alone. You're talking about trillions of dollars, and it'll happen if this creature, any cryptid, is brought out. You can bet somebody's going to run to a federal court and ask for an injunction for the federal government to make people stop going on the national forest. You can't go into state forest. You can't go into your county parks. Can't go into your city parks. Humans are not allowed in the woods anymore. That stops camping, hunting, fishing, hiking, biking. All that's going to stop. And that's trillions of dollars.
Yeah,
And the government keeps it quiet because of money.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's kind of the take I also take, because unfortunately with the government it all boils down to money. So we kind of touched on this earlier, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in all kinds of cryptids. Are there any that really fly into your radar that you think might be a real possibility out there besides like Dogman and Sasquatch?
Skinwalkers. I have gotten reports of skinwalkers. Um, the rake, I don't know what to think about that. Um, I've never gotten a report about a rake. I've never seen one. I've only seen a couple of videos on YouTube about, well, this was a rake. It looked kind of CGI to me, but
Yeah.
I'm not a, I'm not into computers technically. I don't know how to do that stuff.
Yeah, me neither.
Um, I'm a truck driver by trade. Um, the biggest computer I deal with is about this big,
Yeah.
6 inches across, and I push buttons, push the screen to say I'm on duty or off duty or driving or in my sleeper or and I just that's about as far as I go. I've played online games before. I'm not good at it. But no, it's there's other cryptids out there, and I've talked to some very credible people about um, skinwalkers out in the desert Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico. Um, there's other cryptids. There's just some of them are hard to believe, like
Ye-
rakes. I've
yeah.
never had to deal with those. I don't know them. I don't know nothing about them. I've just seen a couple of videos, and like I said, it
Yeah.
looked like it was computer done.
Yeah. Yeah. I got you. And yeah, the skinwalker, that's a scary one because I tend to believe that they're out there too, but I don't want to run into one. But
Well, that's one of the ones that have the spiritual side to them. They're evil. They're not there for your betterment. They're there for your detriment.
yeah. All right. So now I'm wanting to get into the meat and potatoes of this. So first of
Okay.
all, I want to ask what really got you into all this? Where did it begin?
1984, December 3rd, at approximately 2:30 in the afternoon. Um, I'm a high school football player. Played football all my life. Played with multiple hand injuries. If you see my hands, they're they're beat up, and
Yeah.
that's many football games, dislocating fingers, um, smacking into other guys in high school, junior high, playing football all my life. And I was a pretty decent sized guy, 16. Uh, I went through a process of getting my dad to take me hunting that day. It's in the 60s. December 3rd in West Virginia is not in any means supposed to be above 40, 45 degrees
Yeah, I
on
don't think
December
so.
3rd. That year, it was in the 60s. We had a weird winter. Um, that first part of the winter in December, there wasn't winter. But the last part of winter, it was bad. But the thing of it was, I'm deer hunting. I'm 16 years old. I'm old enough to have a hunting license in the state of West Virginia. Now, my dad was very strict about how we carried firearms, how we did things in the woods, how we walked, um, how much noise you were allowed to make. He's very particular about those things. You don't point a gun at something unless you intend to kill it. And that year, I had my hunting license. We won public hunting area. And I taught my dad, begged and pleaded with my dad. I mean, it was almost to the point where, Dad, I'm your biggest kid. Let me go hunting by myself. There's one place I want to go, and I know you're not going to want to go. He didn't even want to go hunting that day because of the temperature. It was just too hot, and he was tired.
Yeah.
He worked. It's the last day. And of course, being a parent, I'm a dad. I've got grown children now. I've got grandbabies. They're not babies. A lot of them are, they're growing up on me too fast. But I begged and pleaded with my dad and my mother, my grandmother, and got to go hunting by myself that day. But there were stipulations. There couldn't be any other hunters in the area, which there wasn't. There wasn't nobody else out there. Never heard a gunshot. Now, we use high-powered rifles. I was using a 30-30 carbine when I was a kid. And if you ever seen a John Wayne movie where he's got that lever action rifle and he can spin it, yeah, I had one of those. That's what I had. But it was in a 30. It was a 30-30, 30 caliber bullet. So once we got there, Dad said, "All right, you can go by yourself. You're old enough. I trust you, and you know the difference between a whitetail buck and a whitetail doe." And he trusted me because I never lied to my parents. If I even thought about it, I'd probably got a spanking for it. I was raised a lot different than kids are today. You didn't lie to your parents. Parents didn't coddle to you. You towed a line, and if you didn't tow that line, you got a leather belt across your butt. And if it went across your legs and your back too, that was just part of the punishment. But I was raised to be honest about things. And I walked after we got out there. Dad said, "You can go." I got my gear on. I put a blaze orange hat on, blaze orange vest. I had a red and blue checkered shirt. That was just something that we wore back then. It didn't have to be like this shirt that I got on today.
Yeah.
It wasn't shiny. It was a red and blue and had a little bit of white on it. And it wasn't,
like a little flannel.
Right. It was a flannel shirt. I had blue jeans on. A pair of sturdy boots. And I went to the place that I wanted to go, which was a mile from the truck. And I've always seen deer there. I've been there many times with my dad. I've squirrel hunted there with my dad. I've bow hunted with my dad there, and never had seen anything. I get there about 2:30. Dad didn't make it home till noon. It's about 11:30 that morning. He worked. It was a Saturday. He run a route, and we got out there, and I went to where the spot I told him I was going to be at. I had to tell him where I was going to be. I wasn't going to leave. I wasn't allowed to leave that spot until 4:30. He said, "You go out there, sit down to about 4:30, and at 4:30, I expect you to be coming back out the road." He said, "If I come out the road and you're not standing up there, you're in a world of hurt." Yes, sir. I knew what that meant. I get there, sit down. I'm there probably maybe 15 minutes. These 3 does, and there's this huge boulder just about 20 feet to my left. 3 does come out that bench that boulder was sitting on. Now, a bench is the way the land is. It comes here in the state of West Virginia, you have benches. They come down and kind of breaks up the terrain.
Kind of like tiers?
Yes. And it's not man-made. It's just the way the ground is. It's all over the state of West Virginia.
Yeah.
But I go there. I sit down beside the tree I told my dad I was going to be sitting at. There's a huge oak tree. I'm going to be sitting right there, 20 feet from the boulder. I won't be anywhere else. About 15 minutes later, 3 does come running out from behind that boulder. Now, I heard them coming off the hill down. I couldn't see them because of the boulder where it was at. They run down. I heard them run down. They run down and run out in front of me about 30 feet from me. They're standing there with their tongues hanging out. They've been running. It's warm, so you know they're pretty hot. And they look constantly over their back trail. 16-year-old hunter, first thing he thinks is they're being chased by a whitetail buck. It's mating season.
Yep.
So I'm sitting there and I've got the rifle across my lap. I pick it up, put it up to my shoulder, and the hammer is in the safe position, which is back then it used to be half cocked on the rifle, on the hammer. Finally, after about 30 or 40 seconds, these deer run off. Again, they just bolt. And I mean, they're covering ground. You may have been able to hit one with an Uzi, but I doubt it. And it may have been 2 minutes later, I heard something that sounded like a whitetail buck grunting. They make a certain noise when they're chasing does. And I'm starting to get a little bit like, okay, there's a deer coming. It's grunting. It has to be a whitetail buck, and I'm going to be able to shoot my first whitetail buck by myself. I'd never shot one before that day. I'd never killed a whitetail deer, a whitetail buck. I've shot does, shot them with a bow and stuff like that. And, it's a progression you do when you're a hunter.
Yeah.
So, and I'm prepared to take care of the animal once I shoot it and put it on the ground. Once it's dead, I know how to gut it. I know how to take care of it. I know that I got to drag it up this hill to the road, and my dad will be out there around 4:30 to pick me up. After this thing walks behind the boulder, I never saw it. It stops and it stands back there, and you can hear heavy breathing. And it's still grunting. And I'm thinking, well, that's kind of strange. That deer must have been running them does for a long time.
Yeah.
But at the pace that it was coming, it didn't sound like the deer was running. It was just like it was plodding along. And you would hear footsteps, And it didn't sound right to a seasoned hunter of 9 years. Those steps didn't sound right. Mm-hmm. It didn't sound like 4 steps. It was like it was walking on 2 feet. Whatever. It's a whitetail deer. That's what's in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But there was questions. Well, this thing steps out at 20 feet. It's not a whitetail deer. It's 7.5, 8 foot tall. Chestnut red in color. Looked like the hair on a red squirrel. And it steps out and stops, and it's standing there, and it's breathing heavy. And it's looking in the direction the whitetails that those does took off. Okay. That's not supposed to be in the woods. And the reason I say that is because just a year before, the same time of year, I had watched The Legend of Boggy Creek with my dad. Back when I was a kid, those type of movies would come on a Saturday night because your TVs always went off the air at 11, 12 o'clock at night.
Yep.
And they played that movie at 9. They had to fill the time up to midnight because it was required that they shut off at midnight. And they didn't come back on till 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. All you had then was snow for 6 hours. And we'd watch that movie. And at the end of that movie, I looked at my dad. I said, Dad, are those things real? My daddy looked at me and said, Son, that's just Hollywood. Don't you worry about it. There ain't no such thing here. He said here. He didn't say there is no such thing anywhere. He said here.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever you, all right, Dad. I take your word for it. But what stepped out was something that had long hair on its legs, its arms, had long hair off its head, didn't look like it had a neck, looked like it was kind of like that. And finally, after about 20 seconds, it just turned its upper body slightly and looked at me and went, like, how the heck did you get here? Now, when I was younger, I could walk in the woods and be super quiet. I was taught that from my dad, my uncles. It was a family thing. And it was, it was something I was taught to be quiet when I went in the woods. So evidently this creature didn't know that I was there. And now it turned its upper body. It never turned its head. It didn't turn its head over to the shoulder like we did. It turned its whole upper body to the right and looked at me with that look on its face, like, how the heck did you get here? Then it turned fully towards me. And I'm sitting there, and I've got this rifle against my shoulder. I'm looking down the open sights on this rifle at 20 feet. It stands there with that funny look at me for probably 10 or 15 seconds. Then it starts to curl its lips. It exposes its teeth, and it starts growling at me.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it wasn't nice.
I don't think so. I was just being facetious.
When I was a kid, my daddy taught me, my uncles taught me never to get excited when you're deer hunting. Because the moment you get excited, you miss, you don't know where that bullet's going. That was ingrained in my head from a very young age. From the age of 6, I'm 16. So 10 years I've heard this. It's in the back of your mind at all times. You don't shoot at something without knowing what's behind it. And, we hadn't seen any vehicles. I'm thinking there's no one else out here. But this thing walks out on 2 legs. I'm not sure what it is. I don't know. It looks like The Legend of Boggy Creek. There's no smell with it. But now it's opened its mouth up and curled its lips, and it's growling at me, and it's showing its teeth, and it takes a big step towards me. Now it's at about 15 feet. I'm thinking I'm part of the menu. I don't want to be on the menu. I'm a kid. You don't want to die at that age. And it starts to take another step. And when it started to take the next step, I pulled the hammer back all the way. slid my finger. It was just a simple motion of sliding my finger in the trigger, finishing cocking the hammer, all in the same motion. There's no sound in the woods. There's no wind. There's no chipmunks, no birds, no squirrels. Those deer are long gone. You don't hear them running. The woods are completely silent. I'm starting to worry. I'm starting to get a little bit afraid. I'm in trouble. At that point, when that gun clicked, when the hammer clicked back at full cock, its face changed from growling at me, showing its teeth, to uh-oh. And it stopped mid-step. Now, I'm looking down the open sights of this rifle. The front sight is right here on its nose. The back sight is lined up perfectly. There's no missing at this distance. And a 180 grain bullet that I was using would have smashed through that thing's head. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. Bigfoot would have been exposed, and we wouldn't be doing what we're doing today. But it stopped. It stood there on one leg just looking at me with that look on its face like, oh, crap. And it stood there it seemed like it was an eternity. Probably no more than 15, 20 seconds. And then it just kind of retracted that foot, set it back on the ground, and started turning its upper body, looking to its left and its right. Well, to the right is the way that it came from. The left is where the deer went. Finally, it turns completely to the right, its whole body, and takes off. I mean, just like it was shot out of a cannon, running away from me. And I'm sitting there going, what do I do now? I'm like, did I really see this thing? Was it there in front of me? And I stood up. I got up off the ground and I stood up. Now I still had the rifle ready to bring it to bear and squeeze the trigger. I've not let the hammer down. I turn, calmly walk up the hill, get out to the road. When my feet hit the gravel on that road, this thing, I never heard it run anymore. And I took 2 steps on the gravel and it screamed at me. I felt it in my chest. I estimated it to be 200 yards away from me, over 600 feet. And I'm thinking, oh, it's going to come and kill me. When I walk out the road, it's going to come and kill me. I never let that hammer down. I started walking out the road, and the more that I walked, the faster I got. I never broke into a run, but I looked like an Olympic walker. It's basically what I was doing.
I'm sure.
The firearm was across my chest, finger still on the trigger, and I got my thumb on the hammer to keep it from going off. All I got to do is just let off the hammer and squeeze that trigger, and that gun's going off. And I get almost to the truck, and my dad either saw me or heard me. He didn't go very far from the truck. And he stepped up there and he said, "Hey, you're back off early. Did you get one?" "No, Dad, I don't want to talk about it." Now me saying something like it to my father at 16, 9 times out of 10, that's going to make my old man mad.
Yeah.
He looked at me and he said, "Do what?" I said, "Dad, I'm not going to talk about it." I said, I want to go home. He said, son, it's still 2 hours before dark. Why are you not out the road? I don't want to talk about it. I want to go home. And I'm just standing there looking at him, like, I'm not saying a word. I'm not talking about it. I want to go home. My dad looks at me and he says, all right, fine, we'll go home. Now he's looking at me like, you done ticked me off, boy. You better start talking. You better give me a reason. And I just walked to the truck. I unloaded that rifle. And he saw the hammerback on that rifle. And he didn't say anything when he saw it. But I know that was a concern of his. He doesn't, he knows I know not to carry a gun that way. I emptied the rifle, put it in a scabbard, put the bullets in the scabbard itself. Didn't put them in the box. That was a major no-no when I was a child. You put those rounds in the box, and the box goes in the gun case. I didn't do that. I just threw the bullets in, shoved the rifle in. The box of shells that was in the scabbard got shoved all the way to the other end. And I took my vest off, took my hat off, threw them in the back, went and got in the passenger door, and he left it unlocked. We always left them unlocked. Back then, you didn't have to worry about it. Nobody knew where you were at. People didn't mess with your vehicles like they do now. I got in the truck. I sit in the passenger seat and rolled the window the rest of the way up, locked the door. My dad comes over, unloads his 30-06 semi-automatic rifle. He took the clip out of it, pulled the chamber open, took the bullet out of it, took everything out of the clip, put it back in his in the shell case, put everything away like he always has, took his clothes off, come up front, opened the door, got in, put the key in ignition, and turned and looked at me and said, "What is wrong with you?" In that fatherly tone. Like, you done made me mad. You better talk. I'm not talking about it, Dad. I don't want to talk about it. He said, son, if you shot a doe or did somebody say something to you? Somebody come down there and run you off. That was a big no-no to my dad. You don't ever say something to one of his kids. There was 4 of us kids. You don't ever do that. I mean, that's, you don't run my kid out of the woods. And I'm like, Dad, no, I did not shoot anything. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything. Nobody come and said nothing to me. All right. So we start out the road. Now we're going to go right past where I was just at. 15 minutes ago, 20 minutes at the most. And the closer we got to it, the more I slid down in the floorboard of that full-size Blazer. And he looks over and he's like, what is wrong with you? And he stopped right there where I was just over the hill. I said, Dad, let's just go. I want to go home. Okay. He takes off. We drive. And all the way out through these country back roads, the way we have to come home, every little once in a while, he'll say, what's wrong? Now, he's calmed down, and he's not mad. But every time he asks, his voice is a little bit higher and a little bit stronger, all the way out to I-77. He stops under the interstate bridge. And I've come out of the floor by this time because he told me to. I'm sitting in the seat, got a seatbelt on, and we never wore seatbelts back then, but I got a seatbelt on, And my dad's, something's wrong with my kid. He's never done this. He's never not told me what's going on. He stops, pulls off the side of the road, and he undoes his belt and he pulls his belt out of his belt loops. Now he's mad. I know what that means. He said, "Boy, you are my biggest kid, but you're about to get a beating." And I looked at him and I said, "Dad, I didn't do anything wrong." He said, "That's not it. You're not telling me what's going on." He said, "If I have to drag you out of that seat and bust your rear end right here underneath the interstate, I will." "I know, Dad." And he looked at me and said, "Tell me what's wrong. What happened?" I told my dad everything. He never laughed. He never cracked a smile. He looked at me and went, "I believe you." He laid his belt down, put the vehicle back in gear. We hit the interstate, and on the way home, only thing that man said to me was, "Don't ever tell your mom or your grandmother." And I asked him, I said, "Dad, why?" He said, "If you tell them what you saw, they'll never let none of us go hunting or fishing again."
Wow.
So I never told my mother. I never told my grandmother. Both of them went to the grave not knowing what I saw. My dad knows. And then in 2019, my dad looked at me one day. I came home from being out of town. He said, "Oh, you're home." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Sit down. I want to talk to you. You remember what you saw back when you were a kid?" "Yes, sir." "I know exactly what you're talking about. I've been chasing them around for years. You know that." He said, "I know." He said, "Me and your uncle saw one about 4 years before you saw that one, just
Wow.
a few miles from where I saw mine. They went
Wow.
fishing and it came down, and there was an old low water bridge that went across the Little Canal River, and they were down there fishing one night, catfishing, and it walked between the fire they had built. And you remember those old campers that used to slide in the truck? There's not
Yep.
very many of them today. Not a lot of
Yeah,
people
yeah.
use them.
I know exactly what you're talking
We
about.
had one of those when I was younger. They were there fishing. Dad had used the camper, and they were in the camper and they were eating fixing sandwiches. They were fishing at night on the bridge. And Dad said something walked between the fire and the camper, and the shadow of it went across one window. And by the time they got to the kitchen window on the side of the camper, him and my uncle stood up and saw it
Oh, wow.
in the firelight. And I kind of looked at him real funny and I said, "Dad, you could have told me that many years ago.
Yeah,
I
no
probably
doubt.
would never have done all the stuff that I've done so far." He said, "Son, there was no way I was going to keep you from doing what you wanted to do."
It's a good
And I
dad.
just, yeah, he didn't try to deter me from going out and trying to figure out what they are. So for 40 years, well, not 40 years, 35 years, I didn't know that my dad had seen one along with my uncle, less than 4 miles away from where I saw mine.
Wow. That is amazing. That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would, yeah, that, you know, I have not seen one yet. I'm not sure that I want to, just because. But before I
It
let you
changes you.
go, I know it does. Even just hearing one changes you. So, but before I let you go, I have to hear about the dog man. I have to, if you don't mind. You saw a dog
Okay,
man?
three,
3. Okay.
three.
Give it to me.
When I was in my middle 20s, I worked for a guy that hauled hay out of uh, Barlow, Ohio, Chillicothe, Circleville. We hauled hay and straw to local horse barns, cattle barns. People would buy hay from him. He'd go and buy the hay, pay for it. We would deliver it truckloads, 300 plus bales, 400 bales, whatever. We had went to Barlow, Ohio, picked up a load of alfalfa hay on Wednesday. Now, the guy that had a sheep farm up in Randolph County here in West Virginia, he'd already paid for it. Well, no, he hadn't paid for it. He'd already paid for the delivery fee and put a down payment on the hay. Well, these are 120-pound bales of alfalfa hay, pure alfalfa. Pretty big bales. We loaded 2 trucks up, 300 plus bales, 700 bales, 704, 705 bales. I think total is what we delivered. We left on Friday morning, drove straight up there, got there to his barn, unloaded it. Thing is, on Thursday night, something had killed, he had 400 sheep. And he had these sheep in 1 acre plots, certain number in each plot. And he would move them around the field in the spring and the summer. And it was clover hay with alfalfa in it. He moved that stuff around, those sheep around, but overnight on Thursday, 200 of his sheep just died. They were killed. Their heads were ripped off. They were eviscerated, meaning they were split open on the bottom. Their insides, intestines, and everything were laying out on the ground. They were dead. The rest of them were all around on another side of the fields. The ones that, if you were looking at the field, the ones on the left, there was 200 in those 1 acre plots that he had made. And it all had barbed wire fence on it. Well, the other ones were in a different part of the field. They were all backed up against the barbed wire fence that next morning, and there was 200 head of sheep laying in this side, torn apart, basically. We got there with the hay, and he'd been up and had his 2 farmhands that he had up there cleaning up the mess. And we show up with all this hay. We unload all of it into his big barn. You could back the whole truck in the barn. Now these are large trucks, 7 layers of hay stacked on top. We back in and unload everything into the top of the barn. Stack it all up there like it should be, to where, it wouldn't catch on fire, because sometimes if it's green, it'll mold and then it'll catch on fire. But he had 700 plus bales up there. It was more than enough to feed his sheep, 400 sheep for all winter. Because he would bring him to the barn and feed him that alfalfa in the winter. Then in the spring, he would get rid of the lambs and he would sell all those. And he was making good money doing it. Well, after we got unloaded, my boss, the owner, said, "You are going to go collect money. Here's a bill. You tell him to pay that. He'll give you all the cash. On your way back, you stop and use that money and pay for you guys' lunch." Yes, sir. This is Friday. We see all these sheep being loaded up in the back of a truck, and they're taking them over and burning them. And I asked him about it. He said, "Well, something killed all my sheep. Killed a bunch of my sheep last night. I'm estimating probably 200 head of sheep are dead." And I'm like, "That's not good." And he's worried to death about it. He's like, "I wish I knew somebody could come and find out what this is about, what's going on." And I start talking to him, and I mentioned to him, "Look, I've been looking into Bigfoot. This could be Bigfoot doing this." I said, "It's kind of strange. They kill 200, don't take none of them." And he looked at me and he said, "What's Bigfoot?" And I'm having to explain to him what a Bigfoot is.
Yeah.
He's never seen one, never heard of it. He's like, "Well, can you come back tomorrow?" "Yes, sir. I'll be back tomorrow morning. What time you want me here?" It gets daylight about 7, so be here at 7. So I go looking through the woods, and I find old structures from what I believe to be Bigfoot. And I went to the top of the hill, and I worked my way back up into that hollow that was on the left side of his field. I'm not finding anything but Bigfoot markers. It's Bigfoot done this. Why, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out. I get halfway down the hill, and the further you went down the hill, the thicker it got. And the darker it got. Now, this is a bright, sunny day. The sun's out, no clouds, light wind. It's a bluebird day. I get halfway down the hill, and I run into the proverbial Bigfoot X. Now, these are not little trees. These are big trees. And there's 3 of them, 3 sets of them, and then going up from the field up. And I know and understand what that means. Those Bigfoot don't want to go into that area. So I go around them and go towards the hollow. I go down there and find a huge dog track. I never knew nothing about dog meat. When I found that huge dog track, I'm thinking, all right, there's a pack of wild dogs. This is way too big to be a coyote. It's got to be a big breed of dog. I go back up out of there and go back top the hill and go across and come around the other side and come around the field, and it's starting to get later in the day. I walk down there. I get to the edge of the fence line, and I look down about 100 yards away. There is this coyote with their rear legs like they always are, and it's standing on its rear legs. But this thing is probably close to 7 foot tall.
Holy cow.
And a lot bigger and muscular, more muscular than any coyote I have ever seen in my entire life. And I'm thinking, what in the heck is this? I look at it through a 4x16 power 50 millimeter lens on a rifle. I'm carrying a 300 Win Mag.
Oh yeah.
And that's my deer rifle back then. And I'm looking at this thing, I'm like, what in the heck is it? And I get to its face, and it looks like a coyote. It don't look like a human. It's just a coyote's head on steroids. It's longer, it's bigger, it's got all the sharp teeth, just like a coyote. And I'm like, what the heck is? And I've heard of reports of people seeing these things here in West Virginia. And finally, the thing, I don't know if it spotted me, smelt me, what, but it looked up the hill at me. And when it looked up the hill at me, I'd say it figured out that what I had in my hands was not a stick. It probably, it probably had seen hunters before. And it turned, dropped all fours, and took off through the woods. Not running like a coyote does, running like we do, if you put your hands down and you bend over to waist and run in the woods. I go to that landowner and that farmer. I told him. He's like, what can I do with them? I said, let me do some research on these things and I'll see what I can find out. I called him, told him I was going to come back on the next. I called him Wednesday night, told him I'd be back up on Saturday. I go do the same process again, trying to find out why they killed the sheep and didn't take none of them. Still don't know. But now I know that there are these things in West Virginia. They're calling them dog men. I get there later in the day. I get there around noon. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I get back to the same point of the fence. Look down, same spot. Another one standing there. And this looked like a German Shepherd standing on 2 feet. And it looks up the hill at me. Didn't growl at me, didn't bare teeth, nothing. Just looked up the hill, turned around, dropped right in the woods. I go back and tell him I saw another one. And we talked for probably 3 or 4 hours. I left there probably 7 o'clock that night. And asked him if he'd ever heard these things howling, ever had any dog prints that he's found. No, not until last week, on that Friday morning. Okay, let me do some more research. I'll be back. I called him later that week, told him he'd be back on Saturday. I go up there on Saturday. Now I know that I've done as much research on these things as I can. That was when the internet was kind of getting started. There was kind of internet, but all you had was dial up. It wasn't fast. It'd take you hours to look up anything. And I'd called a few friends that I knew. And they're like, no, I've never seen one. I don't know what they are. I can't help you. Okay. And they knew what Bigfoot was. And I'm kind of bamboozled on this. I don't know what to do. So I go back and I do some of the stuff that I knew that deterred Bigfoot. And it gets later in the afternoon. Now at that point, I put out flashbangs. And a flashbang is an old can of corn that's been washed out, cleaned out, drop black powder in it. You use a clothespin and a match and a string to set it off. The flash and the stink from the black powder usually works on Bigfoot. but you have to be very careful. You don't want it to explode. So I caution anybody, you try to do what I did, don't do it. If you don't know anything about explosives, don't mess with it. You
I
can get
won't.
somebody hurt yourself. Just putting these things together, it's kind of volatile.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
I come a different way this time. I'm crossing all the fences of those 1 acre plots. And I'm standing there and I look over in the same spot and there's this big black proverbial werewolf standing there. And it's watching me. The rifle comes off my shoulder. I click the safety off. It's at my shoulder. I'm holding the 300 Win Mag. All I got to do is squeeze the trigger. And this thing is standing there looking at me, and I look at it through the scope. Crosshairs are pointing at the end of its nose. And it's standing there growling at me, baring its teeth. It didn't like me. It didn't run. It didn't drop down and just run off. And it kind of gave you the sense of pure evil. And I'm worried. You know, is this thing looking at me like I'm a hot dog or a hamburger?
Yeah.
You know, we're not gonna play that game. You drop down and start towards me. You start walking towards me. I'm gonna shoot you. And finally, it just turned around on its 2 feet, walked right into the woods. Now, the best description I can give you, if you've ever watched the movie Underworld,
Oh yeah.
that big black guy that was in Underworld that turned into that werewolf, that's the werewolf that I saw.
No, thank you.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking. But that's where I saw 3 dog men. Sorry about
Wow.
that. Somebody called.
That's okay.
But
Wow.
that's my encounter.
Wow, that's crazy, man. That's crazy. I love it. Man, your stories, when they're not stories, they're experiences. Because I often do that myself. I say my story, but no, it's not a story. You experienced
Mm-hmm.
it. It happened. But they were amazing, amazing. You were such a great guest, man. I appreciate so much you coming on and sharing everything. In the future, I'd love to have you on again because I don't think we're done talking. There's still a lot more to say.
I've still got 36 more sightings of Bigfoot.
All right. Yeah. So if you'd be willing to come back at a later date, I would love it.
All you gotta do is holler.
All right. I'll holler. You're going to hear from me whether you like it or not. So do you want to take a chance to tell people where they can find you at?
Oh, sure. You can go to YouTube and look up Old Bears. It's an apostrophe S. Den of Bigfoot. And I've got 200 plus videos on there. I try to tell the truth about these creatures, about Bigfoot. I don't do very many dog men or any other cryptid. I do Bigfoot. But there's encounters on there of people, of truck drivers, because I'm a truck driver. I talk to a lot of truck drivers when I'm out of town.
Hey, my dad
That's
was
the only time you get to talk.
Yeah.
You know, we're not allowed to have anybody with us. So my wife or none of my friends or family can go. So when you get to a truck stop and you fuel up, you go in to get you a shower and get you something to eat. You stop at the driver's room and you sit down and talk to somebody.
That's
It's a way of relieving the stress of driving for 11 hours. But there's a lot of truck drivers' accounts on there. There's people that own farms, people that live in suburbs on there, and they tell me their story, and I relay it to the viewers. And they're not just viewers on my channel. You're more than welcome to subscribe to my channel. You're not considered a subscriber; you're considered a friend.
Yeah.
And there's been some recent developments with YouTube that I have considered stop doing YouTube. But just because I may not be putting videos out doesn't mean you can't send me an email, and I'll send you my phone number and we'll talk about your encounter
There
or
you go.
your account of Bigfoot.
You want to give your email out, or do you want
Yeah,
to keep
it's Old Bears. It's just like it's OldBearsDen 2019 at gmail.com.
that? All right.
If you
I've
send me
tried.
an email, I'll send you my phone number and I'll talk to you personally.
All right. Yeah. Well, that's how we did it. So, but I don't know how producer, maybe he can add this at the end and everything, but I'm telling you right now, I sure appreciate you coming on. It was so much fun. I had a great time, and everybody go subscribe and like his page and listen to him. He's got some amazing things to tell, and other people's stories. Go listen to him. And you know what? Listen to us too. If you want to, you can get a hold of me too, right here at this link. And you know what, people? Keep it creepy.